Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We will be eliminating the Canada fuel charge, the consumer fuel charge, immediately.
On his first day as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney is hitting the ground running, dumping the consumer carbon tax within hours of taking office. Will BC do the same? Plus,
it's so hard to find spaces in Vancouver for artists that are, not $3,000 or $4,000 a month.
Vancouver's city centre motor hotel will be torn down and redeveloped. For years, it's been an affordable space for artists, many of whom are now worried about where they'll go next. Also,
over the last 7 days, we've seen 90 centimeters of new snow.
A dump of fresh snow on BC mountains right in time for spring break. A welcome boost for local ski resorts still recovering from Canada's hottest winter on record.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Canada has a new Prime Minister. Mark Carney and a somewhat smaller cabinet have been sworn in at Rideau Hall. And as David Thornton reports, Carney is promising action from day one.
Prime Minister Mark Carney arriving at Rideau Hall, ready to usher in a new political era.
That I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Prime Minister.
Just days after becoming Liberal leader, Carney isn't wasting time filling his cabinet with mostly familiar faces. François-Philippe Champagne is finance minister. Key ministers in the tariff war, Jonathan Wilkinson and David McGuinty, keep their old jobs along with Melanie Joly away at G7 meetings, while Dominic LeBlanc now focuses on the relationship with the U.S. and premiers.
We have new ministers with new ideas, ready to respond to new threats and to seize new opportunities.
Carney's team is smaller, 24 ministers instead of 37, fewer women than men. Immediately confronting the new cabinet, a trade war and U.S. annexation threats.
We will never, ever, in any way, shape, or form, be part of the United States. America is not Canada.
After the formalities, it was straight to work.
I have already met with my deputy minister at ISED, and I have instructed him to prepare a letter that will be going to our suppliers to buy Canadian.
It is a privilege to serve in cabinet. Right now, all of us need to be focused on helping our new Prime Minister Carney, lead our country.
On his first day, the new PM did need help.
Sir, I want to go up here.
On the way to his first cabinet meeting.
See, before I have to get, I'm lost. Just be able to do that. First priorities, we're going to deal with the carbon tax.
The Conservative leader cast doubt on that.
This is the carbon tax law. It's in place today. Until Parliament is recalled, this carbon tax law will be the law of the land.
While carbon pricing is still the law of the land, Carney signed an order ending the collection of the consumer levy.
We will be eliminating the Canada fuel charge, the consumer fuel charge, immediately.
It's unlikely that Parliament will be recalled to change the law. Sources say Carney will be triggering an election this month, sending Canadians to the polls either in late April or May. David Thornton, CBC News, Ottawa.
As Ottawa acts to remove the consumer carbon tax, it seems BC is poised to follow suit. Premier Eby addressing the tax at a town hall in Surrey today. Our Michelle Gassoub was there.
It was interesting how it played out here today because David Eby was at a town hall here at SFU Surrey and he was addressing the crowd saying that he was working on a new law in BC that would prevent people in BC from paying an increase to the carbon tax on April 1st, and he would eventually eliminate it once that federal backstop is removed. That's a promise we first heard during the provincial election back in the fall. Now, while Eby was on stage addressing constituents, we saw that announcement from Ottawa that Mark Carney had used his first day as PM a.m. to use an order in council to eliminate the consumer carbon tax. And so then EB kind of had to pivot after that, addressing the media and saying that BC would then be working towards the same goal.
Our commitment was once the federal government removed the backstop that required us to have it, we would get rid of it too. And that work is well underway.
And so when can British Columbians expect this tax to be scrapped?
Well, it's hard to know, Janella, because our first question to EB was, can you accomplish this by end of day, given that that is what was done in Ottawa today? EB said it's a little bit more complicated here in BC because this is a law in British Columbia. That means they need to bring legislation to the House. The finance minister then needs to incorporate it into the provincial budget. So he did not give a clear answer on when the consumer carbon tax will actually disappear in BC. So we'll have to follow this in the coming days. Janella.
Thank you, Michelle. That's Michelle Gassoub reporting in Surrey. Vancouver's funky city centre motor hotel on Main Street has served as an affordable artist studios for years. But now council has approved a complete teardown and redevelopment. And as Liam Britton reports, some craftspeople worry about checkout time when it's tough to find a room in this city.
For decades, the City Centre Hotel was the kind of place you'd drive the old T-Bird or Studebaker to for a good night's sleep. Lodgers haven't stayed here for years, so artists have made use of it as studio space, like potter and painter Kate Metton and her retail assistant Lucy.
And the motel is a really great alternative to such a full rent storefront. Having a lower rent, smaller space gives me more room to experiment in my work and be less commercial with my practice.
The artist's stay at this old inn was always supposed to be temporary, and now it looks like checkout time is approaching. On Thursday, council approved new plans for the site, 22 and 24-story towers with almost 450 rental homes, plus retail and a cultural space. 500 square meters in size.
It's a significant number of rental units. It's very close to the new Broadway subway line. It has 20% below market. I really like the 5,800 square foot cultural amenity space.
Some here worry about where they'll go next.
And it's so hard to find spaces in Vancouver for artists that are, not $3,000 or $4,000 a month.
No matter their medium, Vancouver artists have long decried the lack of appropriate, affordable space to do their work. Metton says her year here was game-changing.
I think that there need to be more spaces for artists and for experimental small businesses to run. Artists are a huge industry, and it's important that we're supported.
The city, in a statement, acknowledged that's a problem and blamed unaffordability fueled by growing industrial and commercial land value. It aims to build 800,000 square feet of new or renewed cultural space by 2029 and says they're almost 70% there. The hotel operator says it'll be at least a year before artists need to leave. For many of those 70 or so artists, Metton says the next steps are unclear in a city with almost no vacancy. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A teenager has died following an early morning car crash in Stanley Park. Vancouver police say the driver of a white BMW was traveling between 2nd and 3rd Beach when it appears he lost control and hit a tree just after 3 a.m. An 18-year-old man who was a passenger in the vehicle died at the scene. They say the driver was taken to hospital with injuries that are not life-threatening. 4 inmates have been charged in the December death of a 43-year-old man at Kent Institution. The Lower Mainland's Integrated Homicide Investigation Team says Thuray Reset Bolio is charged with 1 count of second-degree murder in the death of Christopher Braun, who died after a fight broke out at the Maximum Security's prison's cafeteria. IHIT alleges several inmates assaulted Braun. Theodore Anderson is charged with aggravated assault and assault. Michael Okmo is charged with assault with a weapon and assault. And Joseph Goulet was charged with assault. All 4 remain in custody. YVR says it's expecting more than 77,000 travelers through its terminals today on the first day of spring break. We caught up with a few who had something to say about the ongoing U.S. trade war tensions.
A little anxious, but, hopefully it's kind of out of sight, out of mind for now, and hopefully it'll be okay.
I feel deeply uncomfortable at times, but personally I think that we behave what we think Americans should behave like.
It's hard because we're dual citizens, so we're kind of caught in between all of this. So hopefully it can all get resolved and we can go back to being friendly neighbors.
Over the next 2 weeks, YVR says it expects around 1.3 million travelers. The airport authority says it's increasing staff in terminals and along the curbs to help out, but it is still asking people to be prepared and arrive early for their flights. Well, with spring break being just around the corner, BC's ski season is still going strong. Local mountains say they are welcoming the weather with open arms as skiers squeeze in their final runs of the winter.
Over the last 7 days, we've seen 90 centimeters of new snow, and we anticipate more snowfall through the weekend and through the next couple of weeks over spring break.
While it's a welcome boost for the hills that are still recovering from Canada's hottest winter on record and a historically dry January, more precipitation is on the way along with some risk.
It brings with it a rise in avalanche danger. And in general, March is a challenging month. It's when statistically the most avalanche fatalities happen.
Avalanche Canada is urging skiers to check avalanche bulletins and avoid high-risk terrain. Gray skies and a biting wind did nothing to temper the enthusiasm of early season golfers in Kamloops this afternoon. As Shelley Joyce reports, most were willing to pull a toque on top of their golf cap to get a few putts in at Eagle Point Golf Club.
Robert Chanuz and Andy Wolf are out on the blustery fairways, despite the weather, to get rid of the itch.
This is the first day of the year for me, and I'm kind of itching to kind of get out and get some exercise.
Golf season can't come soon enough for these die-hard golfers who won't let a bitter chill take the fun out of their day.
4 layers deep. I couldn't put any more clothes on. I'd be like the Michelin Man.
Hand warmers. Keeps my hands warm. Golf gloves for cold weather. Kamloops Golf and Country Club when I used to golf there.
Mary Cassidy and her husband Mel usually spend winters golfing down south, but not this year. They've been eagerly awaiting their first day on the course here in Kamloops.
This is our first full winter back in Kamloops. So as soon as we're able to golf, we're out here.
Did you question your decision at all today?
Absolutely. We said, what are we doing? It's 5 degrees. And it's supposed to be windy, so we'll play 9 holes. If we last any longer than that, fine.
Jesse Woods works at Sightsee Dam, and he has a week off.
As soon as I saw that they were open, I would come out here no matter what. So.
Sam Perrin is a nurse, and he brought along a large, cozy blanket for the golf cart.
Anything to play.
For most golfers, this icy morning is a bit of a shock to the system. But not for Jacob Fillion, who's a student at TRU. He's from further north, so for him, today is downright balmy compared to his home course in March.
Being from Prince George, don't really get to golf early, so it's nice being here and getting to golf all month better than all my buddies.
With warmer weather on the horizon, these weekday warriors are bound to have the leg up when the season hits full swing. Shelley Joyce, CBC News, Kamloops.
Doris Madavi joins us now with our first look at the weather. But before that, we're going to talk about a pretty cool moon that many of us got to see last night.
Yeah, did you see it last night?
I did, and it was something I actually don't know anything about a blood moon, so I'm looking forward to learning a little bit.
Well, it was a pretty good one. They don't always come out this red. This is actually from my sister's friend in Hamilton, a spectacular photo, but I think mine is just as good. Take a look at this. See, isn't it just as good? This is a really great photo. Yeah, I took some really bad photos with my phone, but I did my best with what I had. I had binoculars, so I took a look at those. Here are a couple other photos that I really liked. This one's from Toronto with the CN Tower. This one from Chicago, which just frames it really nicely between the skyscrapers. It was a really great thing, and I hope people got to see it. Now, in terms of what we're seeing tonight, it has been pretty dry, pretty calm compared to what we've seen lately, but there is some more precipitation that is moving in tonight, and expect that to become move across the province into tomorrow, leaving some pretty stormy, unsettled conditions in its wake, mostly on Saturday. Sunday and Monday, a little bit showery, but pretty calm.
All right. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
If you've crossed the street lately, you may have worried about oncoming traffic, but did you know intersections are where you're most likely to get hit by a car? We'll tell you which ones are the worst and why. Did you know intersections are where you're most likely to get hit by a car?
Want to know where you're most likely to get hit by a car while walking on the street? Well, for starters, it's intersections, by far. I dug into the most recent ICBC data to find out which intersections are the worst in BC and why. The info is from 2019 to 2023. It shows that every one of the province's top 50 bad intersections is in the Lower Mainland. 23 are in Vancouver, 19 in Surrey, and then it's a big drop down to Richmond with 3. Coquitlam and Delta with 2 each. Finally, Burnaby, White Rock, Port Coquitlam, and Abbotsford all make the list with 1. There's an obvious trend with most of these intersections. They're busy. There's a lot of people on foot and plenty of vehicle traffic. 15 of the top 50 are near SkyTrain stations. 4 of them are along Hastings Street in Vancouver, with 3 in the downtown east side. Carroll Street, Abbott, and Main. Main and Hastings tops the list by far, with 49 pedestrians struck over a 5-year period.
It's heartbreaking, right? When we hear about, a serious injury or fatality.
Already here, officials have lowered the speed limit to 30 and introduced what's known as leading pedestrian intervals, or LPIs. Basically, it means the crosswalk starts 3 to 5 seconds before the light changes for vehicles. And yet, the rate of pedestrian collisions remains high.
We're potentially going to be looking at additional markings at Main and Hastings as well to try and improve, the crossing at that particular location.
And what about Surrey? 19 of the worst intersections for pedestrians are in the city.
I think there's a lot of work that we need to do. We are one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. We're retrofitting a city. It's a city that used to be more car-oriented and is becoming a lot more urban.
Villarreal says of Surrey's top 19 worst intersections, 7 have already seen changes since 2023. There's plans for 4 more, and several will be addressed through TransLink's rapid transit bus project.
When there's a collision, probably myself and a lot of my engineers, they get an email saying, there was a collision, here is the video, here is what happened. And then we try to see what can we do to mitigate those situations.
Engineers have software to help them analyze factors like time of day, vehicle type, and driving behavior. But for road safety advocates, what's already happening isn't enough.
It's hard to hear that they're on it and then see year after year not seeing any significant improvements.
Buchanan describes the situation as frustrating, with more money spent on studying the problem or pilot projects instead of just making changes.
I would plead with them to use what little resources they have to focus on things that are high impact and focus education on educating about solutions, not educating in a way that is blaming victims.
There's enforcement, education, and then engineering. Design interventions could include things like reduced speed limits, different turn controls, raised crosswalks, more paint, and the LPI signal delay. Villarreal adds better lighting to the list. Chow adds longer walk times and curb extensions. Chow says in Vancouver, it's a balance of keeping traffic moving, keeping pedestrians safe, and limited resources. There, like in Surrey, there's a goal of getting to 0 traffic fatalities, but it's not clear when that goal could be achieved.
Is that achievable? It's really hard. A lot of times we can do all the engineering in the world and still some fatalities or severe injuries are going to happen.
Each year, some of the province's most dangerous intersections get safety improvements, but at the same time, there are more cars, trucks, and people on the road, leaving dozens of people on foot being struck and killed. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
A look down on the lower mainland from atop Grouse Mountain. Plenty of snow up high, nearly 100 centimeters of fresh powder this week. And there's more to come. Darius has our full wintry provincial forecast next. At the end of the G7 Foreign Affairs meeting in Quebec, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio doubled down on his government's threat to annex Canada. Speaking on Canadian soil, he said Trump's position reflects a disagreement with Canada's position. Kate McKenna has the details.
During his visit to Canada, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended suggestions from his president to annex Canada. He downplayed the threat to Canadian sovereignty by saying that it's a disagreement between two governments.
The president has made his argument as to why he thinks Canada would be better off joining the United States for economic purposes. There's a disagreement between the president's position and the position of the Canadian government. I don't think that's a mystery coming in, and it wasn't a topic of conversation because that's not what the summit was about.
But annexing Canada is more than a disagreement, according to Canada's foreign minister.
What I said to the secretary is Canada's sovereignty is not up to debate, period. There's no argument, there's no conversation about it, there's no need to talk about it. You're here, you respect us, you respect our sovereignty, you're in our country, you respect our people, period.
It's crazy. His point is crazy. That's it. We will never, ever, in any way, shape, or form, be part of the United States. America is not Canada.
Germany and the UK came out in support of Canadian sovereignty.
Your country stands together. Canada's unity inspires us. We Europeans, we Germans, and Canada are not only partners, we are close friends. And friends have each other's back, always.
I recognise that there has been anxiety here in Canada at this time. How could I not with Canadian family? But I'm absolutely clear that Canada will remain and continue to be a proud sovereign nation.
But the Italian foreign minister said standing up for Canada is not his job.
But for me, Canada will be Canada over the next years. This is not the problem between Italy and America, problem between Italy and Canada. But it's not my job.
Despite this, Melanie Joly says it was a good meeting, with foreign ministers unanimously agreeing to support a U.S.-brokered ceasefire proposal in Ukraine. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Lamel Bay, Quebec.
New documents show that Hudson's Bay Company, the Canadian retailer established more than 300 years ago, owes nearly $1 billion to creditors. And as Anis Haydari shows us, some customers and workers could be left out in the cold.
Shoppers here already know the Bay is out of money.
I really like Hudson's Bay and how they did try to pivot to really cater to the younger market. They did try, but the competition is steep out here.
So, I mean, I think it'll be a game changer, to be honest. Like, it's a big part of Canada's history.
New court filings show the Bay only has $3 million on hand, compared to debt of nearly $1 billion.
I feel sorry for the employees. I've just talked to several of them inside there, and they're worried. And you know, the worker always comes out last in these sort of situations.
So far, the company says it can pay its more than 9,000 workers, but if or when there are job losses, severance often goes unpaid under creditor protection. HBC owes big money to nearly 2,000 suppliers. Chanel, more than $5.5 million. Estee Lauder, more than $9 million. Ralph Lauren, more than $16 million. But also on the unpaid list, escalator and elevator repair.
It's a very large one. The creditor claims are in the range of $1 billion.
Insolvency experts are watching what they call a huge case.
While it is monumental, I think we were probably expecting it. There have been a lot of retailer filings in the last several years.
It's a dramatic fall for Canada's oldest retailer. Pivoting to online wasn't enough to replace dropping physical sales.
Canadians have significantly changed their habits over the last 10 years, and particularly since the pandemic.
There's speculation the Bay will need to close up to half of its stores, but retail watchers say that might not be enough.
I don't know very many people who are pointing to an obvious escape for them this time.
As for customers, the shopping bag is mixed. Gift cards work for now, but rewards points don't. Just like the escalator repairman, they aren't getting paid out. Anis Haydari, CBC News, Calgary.
It was a heist that made international headlines, and now the man accused of stealing one of the world's most famous portraits from Ottawa's Chateau Laurier Hotel is admitting guilt in the crime. CBC's Paul Hunter has that story.
The mystery of the theft of the Roaring Lion now all but sorted. In this Ottawa courthouse today, said the man accused in one of the most notorious art heists in Canadian history, "I'm guilty, Your Honor."
Mr. Wood, you have anything to say before the hearing? Let's leave this down, but thank you.
But Jeffrey Wood said plenty in the courtroom today, the Ontario man apologizing profusely for his crime and explaining he needed the money to help his brother, suffering deep mental illness. The theft, stealing an original print of Joseph Karsh's 1941 photo of former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, stolen from its place on the walls of the Fairmont Chateau Laurier Hotel in Ottawa more than 3 years ago, replaced on the wall by a fake, which went unnoticed for months until a hotel employee realized what had happened. The theft sparked global headlines and a hunt by Ottawa police spanning 2 continents before its recovery last fall in Italy, having been bought by a collector at auction in the UK. At Woods' hearing today in Ottawa, he pled guilty to 3 charges: theft, forgery, and trafficking stolen goods, with fresh details now coming to light.
This is the evidence?
This is the evidence that was recovered from the scene.
That police found DNA on duct tape attached to the fake Churchill, found to match Wood's DNA found on a toothbrush obtained in a search warrant. The court also heard that Woods likely was planning the heist for months beforehand, and that the path taken by the portrait after it had been stolen likely went from Canada through Mexico and then on to London. How are you feeling, madame?
Very good. Today's the day.
Hotel General Manager Geneviève Dumas was among the witnesses called by the Crown. She told the court she deems the portrait irreplaceable. But Woods' lawyer, Edward Greenspan, suggested to the court, when you boil it all down, it's just a print of a photo made from a negative. Woods' lawyer is arguing for a suspended sentence. The Crown wants 2 years less a day in custody. A decision on the sentence is expected in the coming weeks. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Ottawa.
More tariff tit for tat, this time between the United States and European Union. Why Trump is threatening a 200% import levy on their wine and champagne. Outrage is growing in Europe over the latest tariff threat issued by Donald Trump, a 200% import levy on wine, champagne, and other alcohol imports from the EU if it goes forward with a planned tariff on American whiskey. Anna Cunningham has the latest from London.
Europe sends close to $5 billion worth of wine each year to the US. Now, in France, there is pride in their heritage of producing wine and champagne. But this very suggestion from President Donald Trump that he is prepared to hit the EU with a 200% tariff has created anger and disbelief. The French Prime Minister François Bayrou says the US is threatening to obliterate the wine industry and that EU countries will not yield to the threats. President Trump says it would be in retaliation for the bloc's planned levies on American-made whiskey, which are themselves in retaliation for US tariffs on steel and aluminum. There is certainly deep concern in the European wine and liquor industry.
We really want to say to policymakers in the EU and in the US, enough is enough. We're done being used as bargaining chips. We want to get out of these unrelated disputes, and we really, really want to go back to tariff-free transatlantic trade in spirits.
President Trump has made his views on the EU clear.
I'm not happy with the European Union, I want to tell you. And we're going to win that. We're going to win that financial battle.
In France, we know that independent winemakers represent 60% of the country's wine production, but it's not just France that is angry about this. Spain, Italy and Portugal are all big wine exporters. The French Finance Minister, Éric Lombard, has labelled this escalating US-EU trade war as idiotic. He's planning to visit Washington soon, and he says he's hopeful negotiations with the US will be open. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Investigators are trying to work out what caused an American Airlines plane to burst into flames on the tarmac in Denver, leaving passengers to scramble for safety. Katie Nicholson shows us another terrifying mishap that nearly became an aviation disaster.
It's the last thing anyone wants to see before a flight. On the tarmac, an engine in flames. Frantic passengers crowded together on the wing, barely visible in billows of smoke. Helen Prager, a retired flight attendant, was on board.
The engine made a really bad noise and the plane shook. And I was like, whoa, this was literally on takeoff. I'm like, something's wrong.
The Boeing 737-800, destined for Dallas, turned toward Denver. It landed safely and taxied to the gate, and then...
Orderly, orderly! The people in front of me started screaming when they saw the flames, and then the people started rushing towards the rear to get out.
12 people were taken to hospital with injuries, but all 178 people on board made it off alive. It's been a rough year for air travel. Numerous incidents, including January's mid-air collision between a plane and a military chopper in D.C., killing 67 people. And last month's terrifying roof skid landing in Toronto.
What is going to be difficult for the NTSB and everyone else, Secretary of Transportation, trying to fix the problem, is each one of these accidents has had a different cause.
Investigators will now have to find out what caused the engine to rattle in the air and ultimately catch fire at the gate.
What the NTSB is really going to be interested in focusing is those few minutes where we normally are shutting the fuel off. What was going on during that period of time, and why was fuel still being fed to this engine, and how did it catch on fire?
And as terrifying as these images are,
the system worked. Everyone's training came through. The airplanes were designed to hold together, and everything worked, and people survived.
Something for nervous flyers to hold on to. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Darius Madavi is back with another look at the weather. Darius?
Yes, well, we've got a bit of a break from the rain today, break from the precipitation across much of the south coast, but it's not lasting. We're going to have this next system roll through pretty soon. You can see that we're going to get some snow at those higher elevations because freezing levels are still relatively low. As this rolls through, we're going to see not insignificant amounts of precipitation for sure, but nothing crazy. I'll show you the totals in a second that we're expecting. But the bigger thing is that as this passes through, it's going to leave some unsettled air in its wake, which means the possibility of thunderstorms is present across much of the west coast of Vancouver Island, the South Island, and the lower mainland. So be aware of that. You may hear some thunderstorms tomorrow. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Wet snow at higher elevations is also possible in many areas. Here we can see those totals that we're expecting to see. Again, nothing crazy, fair amounts for the parts of the west coast of the island, but here on the lower mainland, nothing crazy. Some areas may see some more intense downpours all of a sudden because of those storms, but other than that, things seem relatively calm. Here you can see across the province, we're also going to see some of that snow coming to the southeast, especially once we get into the end of Saturday and into Sunday. No warnings to place for the mountain passes or anything like that, but just some more snow for the mountains for the most part, and some showery, flurry conditions tomorrow for the southern interior. Here are the totals that we're expecting to see over the next few days. And again, nothing crazy. Some of those higher elevations, those mountain ranges getting, again, a good dump of snow. Good news for skiers, but nothing to really be too concerned about. I don't have a temperature map in here, but I do want to mention that temperatures, here we go. Temperatures are going to be a little bit below seasonal as we get into the next couple of days. It's going to be the same, similar to today, really, until we get into early next week, around Tuesday or Wednesday. Temperatures will start to come up a little bit again. Like normal in Kelowna at this time of year is like 8 degrees or so. In Vancouver, which is not shown here, it's about 10 degrees. So just a couple degrees below normal in the south. If we zoom in to Metro Vancouver, you can see our 5-day forecast here, where we do have some rainy, wet conditions with the possibility of storms tomorrow, but also as we get late into the day, the possibility of a bit of sunshine. No, I'm wrong. Sorry, no sunshine tomorrow. That shouldn't be on there. My bad. Sunday, some showers, and there we might have a little bit of chance of sunshine. And same thing on Monday and Tuesday. Janelle?
Well, you mentioned it. It is Friday, so you know what time it is? Today is March 14th, aka 3.14, otherwise known as Pi Day. I've never been good with numbers, Darius. I'm so sorry. Dig into that fun fact for us, Darius.
Yes, well, this is quite the number. Yes, happy Pi Day, everybody. 3.14159 is as much as I know, but we have calculated a lot more of pi, and over time, we've gotten better and better at calculating pi. That is a logarithmic scale, so this jump that we've seen in the last few hundred years is really something. In fact, the record for number of digits of pi, 202 trillion digits. That record was broken just last summer. So really something. Do we need all those digits? No, not at all. For NASA's really precise calculations, getting astronauts into space, maybe 16 digits. If you're talking galaxy-wide, maybe use up to 20, 25. But you could calculate the diameter of the Milky Way galaxy to a couple centimeters using 38 digits of pi. We don't need this many digits of pi, but we have them, and that seems really human to me.
You're just making me hungry here, Darius. Thanks so much for that fun fact.
Thank you.
This is our part 4 of a CBC Creator Network series called For Our Attention, a series about people who were diagnosed with ADHD as adults. In this episode, we meet River Tucker, a professional boxer and coach, and how she uses boxing as a powerful outlet for managing hyperactivity, anxiety, and focus. Take a look.
My name is Max Stannard, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at 30 years old.
And my name is Sophia Bitka, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at 25.
We've been noticing more and more people getting diagnosed as adults.
And that ADHD is a little misunderstood, and frankly kind of confusing.
So we thought it'd be a good idea to talk to people who've been recently diagnosed and see how they're managing their ADHD symptoms.
And how to thrive, now that they understand their brains a little bit better.
River's a professional boxer and a coach at Quinted Boxing.
They recently went on a deep dive to understand the symptoms of ADHD that are often misunderstood.
I got a little sick, but Sophia, how did you like boxing?
I loved it. I can't wait to do it again.
Amazing.
Now that I did all my research and the education and what does ADHD mean, and it was very simple. Now that I know about dopamine, I'm like, oh, I see, that's why it was maybe attractive to me. And I just really clicked with boxing. And, you know, I had this old school coach from East Germany who was like, kid, you got to box, you know how to punch, you want to fight. And, you know, like my second class, like very like Hollywood stereotypical. And yeah, I just was hooked. I really, really liked it. I personally feel very grateful for that hyperactive part because I feel it's a gift to be driven so much more to physical activity in a world that is so much about, computer work and office work, and it's just a greater reminder that we need it. Especially when it comes to competing, because that means you're more committed to the high intensity, hyper-focus structure. I was diagnosed sort of by chance. I wasn't really looking for a diagnosis 15 years ago. That was very different times in terms of what they knew about ADHD. The psychiatrist said, you might grow out of it, and it didn't really seem urgent. I didn't realize what it would mean and how it would affect my life. So I never really followed up on it until recently. I decided to just learn more what it would all mean, like which parts of me would actually be affected by the ADHD, or which parts of me are the ADHD.
Are there other symptoms that started to show up the more you learned about ADHD, or did you learn something new about yourself as you were doing research?
Yeah, I definitely learned that things like anxiety and depression will get worse over time. That's a struggle for a lot of people because we're so focused on the functioning, and forget that it would be nice to include the just being calm at home and not feeling overwhelmed easily just because you spend all your energy all day, and probably spend more energy because you tried to be on time, you tried to be organized and listen and not interrupt, and all these things that they say takes people with ADHD so much longer, or it takes so much more effort. My therapist reminded me of the diagnosis gently, and that's when I was looking into it, because really, truly, for the sake of having relationships with people and not just feeling like, just feeling so easily overwhelmed. It's true though, if I now look back, the amount of times I would cry, it's so embarrassing. Not embarrassing, but you just feel out of control, you know what I mean? And you're not in control, you're just crying when you don't want to.
Do you have other management techniques that you have found outside of boxing?
Well, I honestly really felt that starting to take medication did make a huge difference. I'm no longer on this wobbly board. I can maybe be more of myself. It also struck me in a way that I care about other people. So when they tell me about, I think I have ADHD, but it's kind of okay, and they're 23, and they're I've made it this far, and I'm if you add another 10 or 20 years of anxiety and depression, you don't need that, right? You haven't made it that far. It's true, actually, for anything. You got to put in work and be intentional about it, which is what I love about boxing. You always have to work on something. You won't just be a natural. You always have to work. You always have to focus. You always have to improve. You can't just be good at it and then that's good enough. You'll always have to be better, and you can always be better, and you will always be in the company of people who will want to work harder. And if you look up to the big names in boxing, everybody is working on their basics every day. You're in there for the long run to just always focus and work and improve.
There you go, perfect. I'm a pro. Put your back foot back. Yeah.
Here, so this is your long guard. Yeah, see how much longer your punch is? Yeah, too. Long measuring stick, rotation. Yes, exactly, you felt the knuckle.
Awesome. I'm so sweaty, and I'm trembling, and I ready to do it again. Not now, but another day.
When we return, how a Maple Ridge hairstylist is giving back to her community. A Maple Ridge hairstylist is putting her talents to good use by giving back to the community and helping those in need. The CBC's Danielle Piper brings you this story.
At the Salvation Army in Maple Ridge, many people come for a soft bed and a warm meal. But you can also come in for a salon-grade haircut for free.
How's that?
Perfect.
Yeah?
Thank you. Ellie Ullenberger is a hairstylist who usually works at Bromley Hair Lounge. But every month, she volunteers her services with the Salvation Army Ridge Meadows Ministry, a place she says was instrumental to many of her friends who needed support while they were going through recovery together.
Coming from a bit of a dark place myself, it's nice to be able, now that I'm in a position where I can, to give back.
Ellie sets up her pop-up salon in the corner of the dining room, where everyone can see her. She borrows a table and then lays out her equipment and supplies. By the time she's ready, there's already a lineup.
You want me to trim this too? Okay.
First up on Ellie's list is Alan, one of the residents here. Alan is living on a tight budget.
Well, sometimes with pensions and now it's hard to save enough money.
A lack of funds is one of the many reasons people seek emergency shelter or transitional housing at the Salvation Army. Julie Gilfillan is the executive director of the Salvation Army Ridge Meadows Ministry. She says that Ellie's work is very needed.
Breaks down a barrier that our clientele maybe faces day to day. Being able to walk into a hair salon, being able to have the funds to get a haircut, or getting past sort of maybe the stigma of them arriving into a hair salon.
Tara's another resident here who's seen hard times. She's used to doing her own hair in the confines of the bathroom. When she walks over to Ellie, she has these beautiful blonde highlights. And even Ellie remarks how good they look. So instead of a haircut, Ellie does something a little different for Tara instead. A trim and some new layers to add volume.
It makes your day. You know, you walk a little taller, you feel a little better.
It's moments like these that give Ellie hope and motivates her to keep going.
I've grown up in Maple Ridge and I drive past here every day, and I just think it's important to give back to your community where you can.
For CBC Vancouver, I'm Danielle Piper.
We leave you with breaking news tonight. At least one person is missing following an avalanche near Lake Louise ski resort Friday afternoon. The RCMP says it responded to the report at around 3:45 Mountain Time. Parks Canada notes the region is currently at a high avalanche risk in the alpine elevation and at considerable risk in and below the tree line. Visit cbc.ca/news for the latest details. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on our free CBC Gem app, as well as our YouTube and our website. I'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. Have a great night.